Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome NetApp Chief Executive Officer George Kurian.
Good morning to all of you. It's my privilege and honor to have you here at Insight. We gathered today in the most extraordinary of circumstances. Just a few hours ago, a senseless tragedy took the lives of 59 wonderful people enjoying an early fall Sunday evening and impacted the lives of another 500 who will never know a Sunday evening to be the same again. So we gathered today in extraordinary circumstances. I want to begin by just taking a minute to observe a moment of silence. I'd ask that you all respectfully stand up to join me. Please be seated. Yesterday morning, we were faced with a set of extraordinary circumstances, and I want to just share with you that we, as a leadership group, considered all of the possible range of options to consider, including canceling Insight. We consulted with all of the people involved in making this event happen, the local authorities, the hospital, the hotel staff that were involved in providing security for the event, the vendors to make sure that we could host such an event. And I want to tell you that after consideration of all of those possibilities, we chose to move forward. We had over 3,200 people here yesterday at the start of the week. And today we have more than 4,100 people attending this event. And so we felt that given the range of considerations that this was the best thing to do. I know that there's no easy or right answer in those circumstances. I just want to share with you that I felt that given all of the possibilities, that us pulling together as a community in the light of this tragedy would be one way to show the world that we intend to move forward. There's been so much great work done by so many of you, the event staff, all of the contributors, and so much good that can come out of such an event if we put our hearts and minds to it. And God knows the world needs good to come out of this place at this time. And so we aren't going to let the senseless lack of one person defeat all of the good that so many of you have put together over the last year. Nor will we let it diminish the excitement and the possibilities that we can, by coming together, bring to the world over the next year. And it is by doing so that I hope in some small way that we collectively, at this time, in this place, together begin the journey of moving from grief to grace, amazing grace. I hope that together we light the first candle of hope in the valley of darkness and signal to the world that there's so much good in it, amidst this once senseless tragedy. So I want to welcome you to Insight. I know that I do so in the most difficult of circumstances, but it is truly my honor to have you here, particularly so in light of the events of the last few days. I want to welcome you. I want to welcome you warmly, and a special thank you to everyone who put this event together, to the entire crisis team that has worked ceaselessly for the last 36 hours to make sure that this event can proceed as planned. We have a few changes to the schedule that I will share at the end of the day this morning, but over 90% of the breakouts and all of the keynotes will go on as planned, and I will share some of those details towards the conclusion of this morning's events. I also want to thank all of our Innovation Award winners who were here last night, and a special thank you to our partners. The leadership of so many of you reached out to our leaders to assure us of your support, your concern for our broader community that we all work together to support, and for your partnership in helping our customers' needs together with joint solutions, and for your sponsorship of Insight 2017. Despite the circumstances, I'm happy to be in Las Vegas this week to share our commitment to empowering our customers to change the world with data, to teach and to learn together. So I welcome you. I look forward to having a really good week together where we collectively can shape the future of the world. Changing the world with data is the theme of this year's Insight. It's a big, audacious claim, and the reason I believe in it is because it's where your customers are headed and what they expect from you. And it is also where many of you are already leading and working with us to deliver amazing innovations. Consider just a few examples of what some of you achieved with us. From Germany, we have the clean energy provider, Lichtblick, who today delivers a 100% clean energy grid with hydropower and solar power and wind power to over 1 million subscribers in Germany. You are using data and NetApp solutions to transform every customer not only into a consumer of energy, but into a provider using storage technology. And you distribute power intelligently to where it's needed. Congratulations, Lichtblick. From India, we have the example of the State Bank of India, India's largest bank with over 420 million deposit customers in urban and remote rural parts of India. To serve such a large customer base, the SBI is transforming into a truly digital bank, taking a holistic approach to a customer experience and working with NetApp to deliver tailored solutions, strengthening the credit system of India with online and real-time fraud detection technology, and proactively combating money laundering. Congratulations to the State Bank of India. And finally, from here in the United States, we have the National Energy Research Scientific Computing Center, the leading provider of accelerating scientific discovery through computation. NERSC is bringing together a group of 6,000 of the world's leading scientists using advanced computation technology together with NetApp storage and data management solutions to work on problems that change the world. Everything from genomic sequencing to searching for supernovae. Congratulations to NERSC. Amazing. Changing the world with data is something that you will hear of a lot more here today. And we at NetApp are so proud to be a part of the roadmap of so many of the world's leading institutions making profound and fundamental change with data. Speaking about changing the world is changing fundamentally and quickly. Economic pressures, demographic change, pervasive and disruptive technology, the impact of data and machine learning are requiring all of us to consider new ways to deliver business performance. And every customer I talk to is figuring out how to respond, how to digitally transform to improve their business performance fundamentally and dramatically. Today, we are excited to have a distinguished guest to speak to you on how powerful data has become. He is the data editor for the respected Economist magazine, a regular commentator on the BBC, CNN, and NPR. He was a member of the World Economic Forum's Council on Data-Driven Development. In fact, the last time I was here in Las Vegas, I was on stage speaking to our worldwide sales and field organization, and I was holding a copy of the Economist article, "The World's Most Valuable Resource, Data and the New Rules of Competition." So please join me in welcoming the data editor of The Economist, Kenneth Cukier.
Thank you, George.
Good morning, Ken.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Good morning. So data has, in many respects, become such a valuable resource. You're all in the data industry. You're professionals at it. You've been thinking about it for a long time. But what does it mean that data has sort of gone from this exalted position of being important to being perhaps the most important, maybe the most valuable? What I'd like to do is talk about how data is transforming the world, changing lots of domains in the way that we work, live, and think. But to do that, I'd like to start with a story. And it's a story of search engine queries. So we all know that when we search online, we can type in things, and it sort of is revealing what we think in the background without us overtly expressing things that we're looking for. Well, we're expressing things, but not in the way that someone would predict, perhaps. And so Microsoft, just over the past year, realized if we actually look at past search queries, maybe we can do something new with it, something novel. Maybe we could predict disease. Now, Google had done something similar in terms of the flu, but this was different. They looked at certain disease types. They looked at whether someone who was searching for all the things that someone would search for immediately would start searching intensely for a given disease. Okay? And then what you'd be able to do is look back in time at their searches. And looking at those past searches over the past, say, year or 2 years or half a year, you'd be able to see these, if you will, digital breadcrumbs that would explain what they were thinking about and whether the pattern of those searches could predict that someone would be looking for a given disease at a moment in time intensely. Now, there's lots of reasons why someone might be doing that, but when you have a large enough body of data, that the reasons, if it's not exact, becomes a little bit of noise, and you can actually find a signal, a new signal. So if you're searching for something like the yellowing of skin or a loss of appetite or thinning, these are the sorts of things that lots of people search for. And it sort of is naked to the human eye. It simply gets lost in the sweep of time. But in certain combinations, these small little things that on their own are symptoms of pancreatic cancer. And the problem with pancreatic cancer, why it's really the most awful, is that by the time all of these small little symptoms become apparent and you present yourself to the medical establishment, it's often too late. And even really just an early detection of 2 weeks, of a month, of a year is absolutely incredible to save people's lives. Microsoft succeeded. Okay? They were able to find out by looking at 9 million search histories that they could predict between 5 and 15% of pancreatic cancers almost a third of the year earlier. It could save lives. And the really interesting thing is that these signals, however weak inside the data, however weak, were so strong when they were all in combination that the false positive rate is as low as it can get in medical science. Okay, so what's going on? What's happening? What's the story here? Well, there's a lot of different dimensions to it. The first one is technology. We can do things that we never could before. Processors are faster, memory is cheaper. The second thing is data. We have the data today that we didn't have before. Try to do this 10 years ago and certainly 20 years ago, wasn't going to happen. Couldn't do it, literally could not do it. And the third, and maybe the most important, at least today, is the mindset. It's not just about having the technology or having the data. It's about having the mindset and the creativity that you can learn from the data, that the data can tell you things if you have the skills and the humility to extract that value from it. It's in this respect that we think of data as a new resource, as a new raw material, as a new vital economic input. Now, in economics, we've often thought about the three factors of production: land, labor, and capital. And we can appreciate why the classical economists didn't add information to the mix. Because back in the 1700s, to collect the data, store the data, and process the data was so difficult that it was largely impossible to do at any scale. But today, that's completely changed. It's not that these obstacles have gone away entirely, they're still there, but they've gone away mostly compared to what it looked like in the past. Now, of course, we've had information, we always have, and we have more information today. The point is that we're able to do new things with it because the scale has gotten just so large. In the year 2000, we like to think that we are in the information society. We were living so in name only. Even back then, the amount of analog information, books and vinyl LP records, was vastly larger than the amount of digital information. By 2002, there was about parity, and after that, game over. The reason analog information, and it's still growing, right, is it grows linearly, and digital information grows exponentially. And as a result, you can see that it's just increasing and increasing. The pink part is going to have the larger purple part underneath. It's always going to double roughly every 3 years. Now, you're all in the business, so you actually know this. But the point is that the scale is so large that we are doing new things that we couldn't do before. New statistical techniques that mean that we can extract new value from the data before. And the people who are responsible for the data become more valuable to their companies and to society as a result of that. In effect, the point is that the change in scale leads to a change in state. That the quantitative shift leads to a qualitative shift. Or if you like, more isn't just more. More is different. So if we have all of this information, if we have more information, what are we doing with it? How do these techniques work at the cutting edge of how we actually interact with society and apply information to our problems? Well, there's lots of different techniques, but one that I want to talk about now is machine learning. Okay? In the past, with information and with computing, we had to instruct the computer what to do. We had to literally program the computer, and it had to do flawlessly what we asked it to do. Machine learning, if you will, inverts that entirely. We no longer have to specify to the computer what we want it to do. We don't give it instructions. We simply give it lots of data, and we say, you infer what to do. You infer the answer from this body of data without being told explicitly what we want you to do. Now, to explain what that means, it's maybe useful to go back to the origination of machine learning, the genesis story of it, and it comes from the 1950s. And there was a gentleman at IBM who was a computer programmer in the 1950s, and he liked to play the game of checkers. And this is Arthur Samuel behind me. And what do you do if you're a computer programmer at IBM in the 1950s and like to play checkers, but you write a computer program to play checkers? And so he does. He plays the machine. He wins. He plays the machine. He wins. Plays the machine. He wins. Why? Because the machine only knows what a legal move is. Arthur Samuel knows something else. Arthur Samuel knows strategy. So he writes a small subprogram that operates in the background, and that after every new board configuration, it calculates the probability that the new board is likely to lead to a winning board versus a losing board. It's a very long probability table. It's very intricate, too. He plays the machine. He still wins. Plays the machine again, he wins. And then Arthur Samuel leaves the machine to play itself. The machine plays itself, it collects more data. It collects more data, it increases the accuracy of its predictions. And then Arthur Samuel plays the machine, and he loses. He plays the machine, and he loses. He plays the machine, and he loses. And Arthur Samuel has created a machine that exceeds his abilities in a task that he taught it. And this idea of machine learning is going absolutely everywhere. One place it has gone, as in the AlphaGo algorithm. Although this was a souped-up variant of it, of deep learning, the same principle applies of learning from lots of examples. And likewise, here we are in Las Vegas. In fact, recently, an algorithm was able to beat the world's best players at Texas Hold'em poker. Now, for those of you who are aware, Texas Hold'em poker has an interesting feature about it. The only way you can win is to be able to bluff. So in fact, maybe we're teaching our algorithms a little bit too well because they've actually learned how to deceive other human beings. We use machine learning every day. We're sometimes not even aware of it. So if we go onto Google and we type the name of a CEO of an important technology company and we misspell his last name, who at Google knew? Who received the facts to know that, in fact, the last name is spelled with a K, not a C? Well, no one did. What Google did is it went out onto the entire global internet and in 0.61 seconds was able to return 200,000 results. And it saw that those word combinations, right, those three words were far more likely with the last name spelled with a K than with a C. And it's not to say that there's not examples of it with a C. This is the global internet. You find everything on it. But indeed, there probably typos do exist. But the algorithm made a prediction that, in fact, because it was so much more common with a K, this is probably what we were looking for. And so machine learning is at the core of so many of the things that we're doing these days. Computer translations are no longer so comical. Speech recognition works. Alexa, buy me a dollhouse. Self-driving cars, is it because we are able to enshrine all the rules of the road into software better today that we have cars that drive themselves? No. Because of memory being faster, being less expensive with processors? No. Right? The reason is because we've changed the nature of the problem to a data problem, and we've solved it by applying these techniques to it. And if the car, which is a computer on wheels, makes 200 predictions a second, it can identify that, in fact, by collecting all the data in the vicinity of the vehicle, that this is a traffic light, and it's red and not green, and that means I must accelerate, I must brake and not accelerate. Yeah. Whether the human speakers are as good as the self-driving car, the autonomous car, trust the car. Okay. And so on and so on. We're applying these techniques everywhere. So recently, researchers at Harvard and Stanford wanted to see if a machine learning algorithm could be as good as a human pathologist in predicting the likelihood of severe cancer in cell biopsies. And so it loaded up lots of examples of the cell biopsies and the patient survival rate. Some people lived for 6 months, some people lived for 25 years. Some people may have lived for 6 months and got into a car wreck, right? But there's noise in the system. Again, law of large numbers, that's fine, right? The system can still learn. And sure enough, it was not instructed what to look for, but it was able to identify the traits that best predict that a given cell sample is cancerous. In fact, it was able to identify the 11 telltale traits that best predict that a given biopsy is cancerous. The problem? The medical establishment only knew of 8 of them. 3 of the features that the algorithm predicted as being signs that predict cancer were ones that the medical literature didn't know about. The humans couldn't see it. It was naked to the human eye, but it was spotted by an algorithm. So if you're a pathologist, you might have to rethink what you do to bring value to your work, because if it is making decisions under conditions of uncertainty based on your training and your experience, you have a problem because the algorithm might do better. But it's not about pathologists, of course, it's about anyone. If you make decisions based on your training and your experience under conditions of uncertainty, you too might have to reconsider what it is you do to bring value to your companies and your profession. And it's not to say that you won't be able to. You certainly will be able to do those things, but what you will do will have to change. This example, of course, is not about hospitals. It's not about the medical establishment. It's not about patients. It is, but it isn't. It's about something else. It's about something far larger still. It's about a way of looking at the world. Every heartbeat, every gust of wind, every sales transaction, every time a plane takes off. Right? It's about thinking about the world in an entirely new way. The world is a platform for the collection and the analysis of data. So what is the value of data? What is its value? Well, in the past, the value of the data was the primary purpose for which the information was collected. But in this new world, with these new techniques that we have, the value of the data is all of the secondary purposes to which the data can be put. Take, for example, Walmart. It collects information on its past sales transactions. It does so for bookkeeping. Recently, it looked at its huge database of sales transactions, and it married it with weather data. And it identified that whenever a storm was approaching America's Northeast, not only would sales of storm supplies and flashlights and batteries increase, but also the sales of Pop-Tarts. Now, this is well established, right? So Walmart knew that it should stock the Pop-Tarts out in front of the store, along with the storm supplies, to help people rushing in and rushing back to the car before the storm hits. It helps everyone. Everyone wins. Well, if your children like Pop-Tarts too much, like my own, maybe not everyone wins, your dentist wins. Okay. Value. Okay, the value of data, the data had become an asset, and the value was in the reuse of the data. The data now actually is one of the most valuable corporate assets because we're allowed to tap it to do new things, to learn new things that we couldn't know before. And these new things that we have can actually be quite transformative. So let me give you a couple examples of just in the past couple months or past year of how data has been really transforming lots of different industries. So one example is right here local in Las Vegas. Caesars recently was in bankruptcy proceedings, and it turns out that the creditors had actually valued the data alongside Caesar's Palace at $1 billion. $1 billion based on the data. That made all of the assets of Caesar's Palace, from other infrastructure, hardware, brand, physical plant, property, less expensive than just the data that it held. The largest, most valuable asset was the data. So this should be good news, except for the fact that what they found was that the subsidiaries that were not able to tap into that data started to underperform. So it seemed to increase and validate that value. But the bankruptcy judge actually acknowledged that that value was dependent on who had it, because if it went to a competitor, they wouldn't be able to access it and tap it for its true worth. It wouldn't be as valuable to another casino, but it would be that valuable only to Caesars because it was Caesars' customers. Okay. So just about a year ago, Microsoft acquired LinkedIn. What did they buy? Well, LinkedIn does bring in some revenue, right? If you're an HR professional or if you have the premium account, it's not a lot though. What they were buying was the information on all these people, because about 500 million people in the world are registered with LinkedIn, and they have 100 million active monthly users. So if it was $26 billion, that they value those users very highly indeed because of the network connections of them. Who is connected to who? And Microsoft used to be in the packaged software business. Now they're in the office productivity, and they're now also in the data business. And this was a way of understanding office users of information. In the United Kingdom, a large supermarket chain that has a pharmacy associated with it as well is able to identify through their loyalty cards that shopping patterns predict the likelihood whether someone is actually going to come down with dementia. Critical finding, and it's done very similarly in the way to the pancreatic study before, but this time it's sales transactions. What they were able to do is look for a person who then starts getting prescription for medication for Alzheimer's, and then to look at what they're purchasing in the past. And they were able to identify the traits that predicted, as much as years before, that in fact they were coming down with dementia. The trait, interestingly, was that they were shopping for the same things. The people just seemed to coalesce their shopping behaviors on the same brands and buy more of it. Something about a comfort around the familiar. Okay. The area of law is interestingly becoming datafied as well. What's happening here? Well, we do know that maybe we don't want to support the lawyers so much, but it turns out that justice is really important in society, and lawyers need to understand how they can craft a very good legal argument, and you can apply data. So a lawyer might be able to find out that this sort of argument has a very good win rate with this precedent in these sorts of cases, but not in those. Or with this particular district court, or this particular judge would be swayed, and you can understand that. And there's lots of ways in which we can take features of the justice system, automate parts of it to lower the cost, but also to become more effective in the administration of justice. Startups are using it too, but in ways that their investors like. You can take all the features of how a young company is growing and look at it compared to other young companies at that level, at that stage of development across the United States, and you can identify that a company that has this much investment, has around for this much time, has these many employees with these many PhDs or not, depending on the nature of the business, with this much revenue or not, with this much attrition. And an investor can understand that, yeah, this pattern matches companies that are really, really good, versus, gee, you're hiring, but you're not hiring as fast as I would have thought. Maybe you're not being ambitious enough. The data is telling us that companies that in your sort of stage of development should be doing this and not that. And you can learn new things, and it's beneficial for everyone by learning from the data. Call center operators have a lot of information, and there's some really wonderful ways in which we're able to manage their HR activities far better than before. In one really interesting example, a call center was able to identify that for the teams that used to have individuals taking their coffee breaks separately, so there's always someone manning the phones at a given time, they would perform and there'd be a given sort of attrition rate. But for those teams that all took the coffee break at the same time, which actually the management didn't want, but if you took the coffee break at the same time, well, those teams really outperformed. They did really well. What was going on there? So they actually had to step away from the data and kind of look at the ground truth. They interacted with it, studied what's going on. Two things. It's a little bit obvious when you learn the answer. The first is that teams who take the coffee break at the same time have fun at work. And because they had a little bit more fun and they were enjoying themselves, they probably showed up in the work as well. They also they had less attrition. They didn't look for new jobs as quickly. That was a great win. But the other thing they realized is when they were at the coffee break, what did they talk about but what was going on? And they were actually sharing best practices. So they were becoming better employees by all taking the coffee break at the same time. So the company was able to now reassess and rearrange how they manage their workforce. All of these examples point to something, and it's something really big. It's the idea that just as we have the human genome to understand who we are as individuals, so too there is a strand of DNA across everything that's going on in society. There's sort of an information quotient to all the activities that we do, that if we can tap into it, we can learn from it in new ways. Now, the question, though, is that you have to think about it in really creative ways, too, because just sort of marching in lockstep with this appreciation doesn't get you where you need to go. You need to add some of your ingenuity also. A great example of this comes from the area of overseas development. Now, lots of countries give and donate money to poor countries to support their economic development. And if you wanted to understand what was going on, in terms of where this money's going, you would look at a spreadsheet that looks a little bit like this behind me. So this should be obvious to everyone what's happening. Of course it's not, right? I mean, it's just too difficult. It's complex. It's complicated. You can't do it. It's hard to do. So there was a nonprofit organization at the University of Maryland that had a different idea. They decided they were going to take a country and look at all the overseas aid that it received, and they would attach a GPS tag to every single dollar spent. All of the aid, every dollar, a GPS tag to where the money actually went. So if the organization was based in Nairobi, didn't count. Who was the recipient? Who got the aid? And they produced a map of that. They just depicted it there. And this was an important map when it landed on the laps of the directors of the World Bank, because they were justly proud of their activities in terms of supporting Kenya in terms of its development aid, but they were surprised to know where the money was going. Firstly, they could see that there seemed to be a lot of programs within a day's car drive of Nairobi, the capital, which seemed to suggest that maybe the aid was going to the ease of life of the donors and not to the benefits of the recipients. The second thing is you can see that the areas of the most toughest poverty, which is depicted in the darkest color, were the ones that didn't get the most aid, while the ones that were a little bit lighter did receive more aid. And if you were to simply map on top of this the tribal areas of Kenya, and Kenya is a tribal country, that you'd see that actually it looks like some tribes seem to be very good at getting overseas aids, and sadly other tribes weren't. It means that we can actually learn something new when we take the data and we depict it in a new way, because we can appreciate it. It can tell us things if we bring our imagination to it, to learn new insights. But that only happens when the data is used, because if the data is not used, we don't get those benefits. Now, if we understand that the data is an asset and we need to treat it like it, and we put it into a bank, like a data bank, that we can then see that just as in the banking system creates a multiplier effect for our capital, because when we put it into play, we can actually spread it around the economy, and the economy grows. If we take that money, we put it under a mattress, it actually just lays fallow. It's like a lamb that's not been seeded and doesn't bear fruit. So we want to put the data into a system so that it actually can be used for the purpose of helping people. Now, that's going to become more and more important to get these benefits from data, the more that we actually have these techniques that can extract learnings and insights from the data. An example of this is using the voice prints of fraudsters when they call up call centers of banks. In Britain, sadly, the rules make it really difficult to share the biometric voice print of the fraudster from one bank to another. So that's a bit of a problem. In a way, innocent people are subsidizing criminals because the laws don't allow that sharing to take place so easily. Likewise, in hospitals. Here in America, there's a big problem of hospital infections. You go into a hospital in which you have an operation, your treatment, you spend a lot of money for it, and then you might get an infection, requires you to treat you more with even higher toxicity of drugs. Right? Data can be brought to bear to support this and to lower the incidences of hospital infections, but the best techniques are not used because the law doesn't make it very easy to do. And all you have to do is think about communicable diseases like Ebola, and you think that, hey, it seems like there's a moral imperative to use data. That if you believe that it's important that if we see suffering in the world to reduce suffering, if we see the death, that we can reduce death, then we can understand that data is the way in which we can bring to bear the empirical evidence of the world to improve the world, and that we should be doing it, and we can. The implications of this are tremendous. What it means is that it's change. It's change in the organizations and the people who work in them. What you need to know changes. Who you need to know changes. Those who you interact with change. The skills you have change. The humanity that you bring to your work changes. You need to be a human API, an interface to take what's happening at the level of the data and the algorithm and to speak to the managers who actually are making decisions and controlling the capital, resources, and strategy of the business, and saying, hey, here's what we need to do, and here's why it's going to be so important. And my job down at the data level is to be out in front of you, ahead of you, to tell you, hey, here's what's possible. Because once I give you the vision, you can communicate it, you can give me the resources, and together we can do incredible things that we wouldn't otherwise be doing. And the nice thing is that in this world, there is a legacy advantage to companies. Whereas at the beginning of the web, it seemed like the advantage shifted to the startup because they were unencumbered with the business models of yore. Today, existing companies, legacy players, are in a very nice position because they hold the data. Data is going to enable us to handle many of our global challenges, whether it's climate change, whether it's trying to prevent diseases, whether it's better managing our cities, and even responding to tragedies like the one from 2 days ago. Data is a part of it, all throughout it. Whether it was first responders who knew what was going on and where to go, the ambulance crews who, there's just a hospital about a 5-minute walk away from here, we're told, don't send us any more patients, go to this other one, because they can handle those patients in those conditions better than we can. And so we were saving lives by the effective use of data. for the survivors, for the loved ones to know that they were safe, to remove that anxiety. The big web platforms were connecting people all together. And we could even think together as a society about how we can apply data in even more ambitious ways to prevent such accidents from happening. But it is clear that data is going to be part of all the solutions that we have in all of the challenges that we face. And that's a really nice and optimistic thing to think about, that we have in our ability a way to use the evidence and factual information of society to improve society. Now, we've always been able to do it. The difference is that these tools are so powerful and so incredible, we can do it better than ever before, and so we must. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Okay. What an inspirational close. I was listening to your perspectives on the world and the opportunities in front of us, and I was curious what your view would be for an organization that is intending to embark on this journey. What are some of the critical ingredients for success?
It's a great question, and I'll build on what I said earlier about having to have the ambition to do things. It's really about leadership, but when people think of leadership, they think of the leaders, they think of the bosses, and that's not it at all. The bosses need to have that leadership because they can control so much in terms of strategic direction and resources that are important. But I think it's more important that leadership happens at the lowest level of the organization, and if you will, this is the Colin Powell form of leadership, which is to say, it just doesn't matter where you are in the organization. If you imagine that you have this margin of maneuver, you're simply walking in lockstep, you need to think much more broadly of what's possible. And by doing so, you can realize that it is your job to get out in front, to be creative, to actually not accept the status quo, and to understand that if you have these new tools or these new techniques, that you can do new things, but you need to bring people with you. So that form of, say, individual leadership all throughout the organization is incredible. Because as you know, being the boss of an organization, as someone who leads teams but who also reports to others high up, I'm always amazed at how my bosses always feel like they're handcuffed, that they can't do things, and they're looking to the people lower down to actually get stuff done. And I think that's a pervasive view, that you think that at the top you actually are able to do things, but in fact it's the people lower down who actually are closer to the ground truth.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ken. Thank you for your perspectives, for being here this morning, and we really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Speaking of leadership, I wanted to introduce to you the leader of NetApp's own information technology agenda, our CIO, Bill Miller. He leads our IT transformation roadmap and works closely with customers. Bill joined us last October and comes to us with an extensive and respected background in the CIO role across a broad range of industries, including semiconductor, design and manufacturing, communications, cybersecurity, and many others. Bill's a frequent speaker on the topics of information technology in the future and the role of the CIO in enabling the success of digital businesses. Please give Bill a hearty welcome to his first ever Insight. Bill Miller. Good morning, Bill.
Thank you, George. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here at NetApp, and I'm passionate about the role of data in our future. I'm excited every day to be collaborating with our team, helping our customers and their customers to harness the power of data. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. HealthX is the largest public health information exchange, known as an HIE, in the United States, and it delivers to over 16 million people, an amazing number. And as you can imagine, healthcare landscape in New York City is complex and quite fragmented. HealthX aggregates huge amounts of patient data. Over an 8-year period alone, HealthX has amassed 170 million hospital encounters and a staggering 1.6 billion lab results. Enormous number. Over the past 2.5 years, the volume of clinical messages at Healthix has grown from 15 million to over 50 million per month. Healthix data storage needs are growing today at a rate of 100 terabytes per year. CIO Todd Rogo has worked in the HIE space for 10 years now. Prior to joining Healthix, he drove the technology strategy for 2 statewide HIEs. As a CIO of Healthix, he provides the vision, the strategy, and the day-to-day operational leadership for the company. Please welcome now to the stage, Todd Rogo. Welcome.
Thank you, Bill. It's a real pleasure to be here today and to speak to everyone here at the conference. As Bill said, Healthix is the largest public health information HIE in the country, the United States. We connect a huge range of healthcare providers from the biggest hospital systems to the smallest community health centers and physician practices, over 1,500 physicians across the New York City and Long Island area. Beyond our own health information exchange, we also integrate with more than 50 of the top electronic health record systems, including those which you may have heard, Epic and Cerner. And we send and receive information in real time. So with a patient's consent, physicians from hospitals across those networks can access a patient's medical history and receive alerts on the patient's healthcare conditions. In many clinical settings, the information we're providing can have a direct impact on the quality of the patient's experience and improve outcomes. Many providers query our system the day before the patient's visit, so they have the most up-to-date information, including access to encounters from specialists, medications, allergies, current lab tests, and in some cases, even the full images from MRIs and CT scans, which are really powerful. All to support coordinated care. HIEs can also have broader impacts on our healthcare landscape. In our healthcare systems today, you are probably well aware that delivering value-based care is major. And early intervention is the key to keeping patients healthy and costs down. HIEs can help reduce avoidable hospital admissions, and who wouldn't want that? Data is key. Healthix aggregates huge amounts of patient data. Here's one interesting fact. Healthix, as an organization, has access to a more diverse set of data than any single hospital system in the country. That's just because the number of connections that we have flowing into our exchange. We leverage that data to deliver population health management services, including predictive analytics and accurate risk analysis. This helps identify patients who may develop chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, asthma, or COPD. Healthix predictive analytics also generate risk scores to identify those patients that are likely to require emergency care or could drive hospital readmissions. These risk scores can help hospitals and the doctors provide proactive care for at-risk patients and potentially reduce the overall risk of care or the overall cost of care. Healthix analytics engines work throughout the night to provide fresh risk scores for 16 million plus patients using the most up-to-date information available. Currently, it's an 8 to 10 hour process, which we'd like to shorten. But with updated metrics, we can identify patients and that can otherwise slip through the cracks in our healthcare system. So our infrastructure has to be available and perform services quickly. The sheer volume of data we're dealing with also presents challenges. For example, as Bill said in the introduction, we're now collecting over 50 million messages per month. And when I joined the company 2.5 years ago, that was only 15 million. This number continues to grow. It's not going in the opposite direction. And what are we going to do with all this data? Every message that comes in is stored and archived in multiple times throughout our system. and we push out an average of 750,000 real-time clinical alerts to clinicians in our community on a monthly basis. Our data storage needs are growing at the rate of 100 terabytes per year, and this just keeps going up and up. We also must comply with patient privacy laws and numerous healthcare policy regulations. And that means carefully tracking usage logs and audits to know who exactly has access to which data we provide. Healthix relies on an infrastructure that can provide the speed and reliability we need to crunch the data and provide insights to our customers on time, every time. As we look to the future, our focus is on continuously improving patient care and engaging patients to be partners in their own care. We continuously are creating new APIs to make that data available to the broader healthcare ecosystem, including patients themselves. Healthix is changing the lives of millions of people, saving lives and improving care with data powered by internet. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Fantastic. Appreciate that. You know, you're talking about some amazing scale here, and with that scale comes challenges. So as you're looking at this data growth and the speed of access, you need to access the data and digest the data. What are your priorities looking forward in modernizing infrastructure and potentially investing in a next generation data center?
It's an excellent question, Bill. Technology is changing so rapidly, it's really hard to stay on top of even being a CIO. So one of the things I really look towards are our technology partners, really to provide that guidance in this space. It's extremely hard to stay on top of it, and I'm so excited about technology, but it's a challenge. We all know it's a challenge to keep up. One of the things we're doing right now, Bill, is we're implementing as we speak, moving our whole production system to all flash array. You know, performance is key, as you saw some of our numbers earlier, where the 8 to 10 hours of processing data on a nightly basis. We'd like to bring the predictive analytics aspect down to a much shorter time frame. So.
Fantastic. You know, with this audience, a very technically savvy group, they're all very familiar with the importance of securing data. Are there a couple of approaches that you're considering implementing that would enhance security in the healthcare space?
Absolutely. This is something that keeps me up every night, including last night. Blockchain is something I'm looking at with a lot of hope. I've been watching it for a while now kind of develop. It still has a little ways to go, but kind of establishing a new trust framework that will help secure data. And another thing, you know, coming from a small company, even though we're New York based, just keeping on top of the alerts that could be, most of them are false alerts, you know, people trying to access our system. With a small staff, that's really challenging. So I really hope that we can leverage artificial intelligence. I know there are companies starting to do this now, and computers can help us kind of filter down so we can really focus on those alerts which are most useful to us and important to us to secure the data.
Fantastic. It's on everybody's mind, and it's going to be on all of our minds for quite some time. You know, before we close this out, I got to ask you the big question here. Okay. All right? From your perspective as a CIO in this space, what's the next big thing in healthcare that's going to help you enable your clients to change the world with data?
So this is the Todd Rago opinion. So it's
Right, great.
Anyway, let me ask, how many people in the audience are wearing wearable devices? Can I just see a quick show of hands? So we've got, yeah, quite a few people out there. So, you know, what's really fascinating to me is I think we're dealing with a lot of data today. We're just the tip of the iceberg. The data that you're collecting is also being aggregated, but it's not coming to Healthix. And more clinicians are putting devices in your home to really serve the patient in a better way, more real time, and reduce costs as well. So the challenge here, and also the opportunity, is to collect this data. And I think what really is exciting is it puts you, the patient, in the driver's seat of your healthcare more and more. So as you kind of go throughout your journey in life and you start to have healthcare experiences, it puts you in control. And that's starting to really change our business. Our business has been very focused on serving the clinicians, which in turn serve the patients. But we're starting, as all of healthcare, starting to flip up on its end, which is really putting the patient in charge. So that's really starting to affect our business and my job at Healthix.
Well, I think it means a lot to all of us, depending on healthcare as we go forward. It's a fantastic story. We really appreciate you sharing it with us today, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, that's a very exciting story. I want to transition to our next speaker and introduce our next speaker from a company called CloudOps. CloudOps is the most experienced independent multi-cloud integrator and engineering firm with a focus on operational excellence. The firm is based in Montreal, Canada, with a global customer base, and CloudOps has helped hundreds of software companies and dozens of service providers take maximum advantage of this emerging phenomenon of cloud computing. Ian Ray is the founder of CloudOps and is a former CIO of a real estate investing firm. He joined the tech industry in 1999 as the vice president of engineering at a company called Coradiant, which is a true web infrastructure pioneer. He's an advocate of startups and kind of a co-founder of something called Year One Labs, which was the first lean startup accelerator. And he serves on the Genome Canada board, which is an incredible accomplishment itself. So I'd like at this time to welcome to the stage Ian Ray. How you doing, Ian?
Thanks, Bill. Hello, everyone. I'm really honored and frankly very humbled to be here with you today. I'm going to give you a little rundown on sort of where CloudOps is coming from, and then talk a little bit about where we are today, where we think we're going, and then with Bill we'll be able to get into talking about some customers, which I think is what you guys want to hear about. So when I got started out 10 years ago, this was very early for cloud. So our mission back then was really help change the world with cloud. So it was early. Advisors were skeptical, and we were able to, but we were small, and we were able to get started on and take that risk. And what we really believed in, what was really exciting, was the concept of, because we'd all been there before, where we had not enough resources when we needed them, too many resources when we didn't need them. Getting the right amount of infrastructure at the right time was really critical. And one could argue that the cloud has been really successful because of that uncertainty in the modern world about exactly how much you're going to need, when you're going to need it. One could maybe even argue it's been too successful, so successful that the developers and shadow IT have, in the last 10 years, really dominated the adoption of cloud. And I think a lot of us are still catching up to that. And as a result, about 4 years ago, our mission really changed. It was no longer about helping the world get to the cloud. It was how do we own our destiny in the cloud? And I think that really ties into what NetApp does. So just a couple of quick stories. 2008, I get a phone call. One of my engineers gets a phone call from someone who was not yet a customer at the time, and they said, hey, we've been running some stuff in Amazon Web Services, and we can't find our database. And so back in 2008, until late 2008, there was no what's called EBS, Elastic Block Storage. And so basically an EC2 instance didn't have persistent storage. And so once it got rebooted, you actually lost your storage, which meant you really needed to take a snapshot, store it on S3. Well, these guys were like, how do we just lose our data? And that was sort of the battery is not included moment of cloud for me, back in 2008. And we had to explain, look, your data is gone. You didn't sort of follow the best practices at the time. Another thing that was really challenging in the early days of cloud was the notion of cloud backups. So early on, cloud backups were actually snapshots. And I think most of the people in this room appreciate a snapshot isn't necessarily a backup. And worse, these were non-quiesced snapshots. And so we had a lot of situations where we had to do data recovery. Now, of course, the cloud's come a long way. About 5 years ago, I was dismissed for suggesting hybrid cloud should be a focus for those of us working in the cloud industry. Well, I'm here to be very pleased to be working with all of you on solving exactly that. And the other problem we've really dealt with in the last 5 years is, APIs were a bit of an afterthought with a lot of infrastructure. And I think we've come to understand the importance of APIs as a first-class citizen, okay, in infrastructure, and not as a bolt-on afterthought. And I think NetApp's doing some amazing stuff there as well. So let me just chat briefly about what we're doing today. So the cloud wars are, in a sense, over, and all the clouds have won. And we all have to deal with the consequences of this, right? So some organizations are really trying to say, look, we're going to go cloud first, and we're just going to pick one cloud provider as a partner. But I'm going to guarantee you that all of you, if you run an organization of reasonable complexity, have to deal with all the clouds, okay? And that's a real challenge. Data gravity is a real problem, and it's getting worse. So once you've got data in one cloud, and you need to use a cloud service that's come out on another cloud, let's say it's a machine learning cloud service, getting that data from one cloud to another is really a non-trivial problem that we all have to deal with today, and I think that's another area NetApp's doing some great stuff. We were told early on by the analysts that cloud was going to be a commodity. I don't think we're really seeing that yet, okay? I think there's still, the cloud providers are all driving a lot of value at the application layer. It's still very hard to exchange cloud resources from one cloud to the other, which for me would be that moment where we can say, this is a commodity. And so the solutions that CloudOps is working on today are really around how do we manage all this? How do we operationalize all this? And how do we make sure that we can get the right data in the right place at the right time? And we see it as a bit of a three-layer cake. On the bottom end, this is where the resources are to be controlled, and a lot of these are things like storage and networking and compute services. In some cases, those resources actually come from a cloud provider. In the middle layer, where CloudOps has really invested heavily, is around open source, and there's some really amazing tools out there. And we really view open source as a way to own our destiny and help our customers own their destiny. Because in a very fast-changing world, you want to really reserve the right to change the mixture of solutions that you have, that you're bringing to bear, and delivering to your business. And then on the top layer, that's really where our customer differentiation and where the product, the real product is delivered. So what are we thinking about in the future? Well, number one is, I think, on the private cloud side, which has been a really challenging area for the last 5 years, we think HCI is going to have really, really important impact, because it's been too darn complicated to build a cloud and operate a cloud, and the most important part, have happy users. And we think that's a huge opportunity, and I think there's going to be some chat about that at this conference. Workload containerization is a huge deal because it's helping us solve some of these really challenging workload portability problems. And so that's an area where we are working very intensely with a number of customers today. And there's a project which some of you might have heard about called Kubernetes that works a lot with containers and Docker. And this is another area where NetApp, I think, has invested very wisely in the interface between these technologies and the storage with their Trident software. As we race in the future, we think networking is going to become an increasingly challenging problem. As we generate and consume more data, and the data is now recognized, as we heard earlier, to be far more valuable than we imagined. And I think the days may be coming where the value of that data may end up on the balance sheet of an organization. We heard about that a little bit earlier. As networking becomes the hardest problem, there's a quote that keeps coming back to me from the late Bill Gray from Microsoft Research. And he told a colleague of mine that compared to the cost of moving bits, everything else is free, which sounds a little absurd at first, but if you start to think about the constraints around networking, the fact that speed of light is a constant, but the amazing rate at which we're generating, consuming data, it starts to make sense. So networking is going to be a really challenging area. We also think the cloud is coming for your data center. I don't know how many of you actually feel like that, but Amazon's got a really interesting service they launched in the last year called Lambda, and that is actually starting to control resources that are in our own data centers. So we really feel like software-defined is eating the world, and really it's a question of whether you will control it or it will control you. So with that said, I'm going to talk about some customers with Bill, and I think he's heading out here to chat with me in a second. Thank you.
All right, good stuff. All right, well said. All right, let's talk customers. Ready to talk
Definitely.
customers? All right, you must have some really interesting stories about customer solutions to share with us. And from your perspective, it's basically solving challenges for end users and other service providers. So what can you share with us today?
Well, I think we've got everybody's sort of seen the news lately about Hurricane Irma. Some folks were impacted by that. We have a customer who's in the Caribbean, Latin America. They're here today. They're at the conference, Cable and Wireless. They're one of the leaders in delivering disaster recovery as a service in the region. And it's been really amazing to see the customers in the Caribbean who rely on their virtual data center services and their disaster recovery services that are located in places a little bit out of the path for the hurricanes, such as Panama and Bogota and Curacao, and the amazing value of these companies being able to continue to run their businesses after these terrible events. So that would be one great example. And that's more infrastructure focused. We've got others that are much more sort of software defined and cloud native. I mean, there's a great company up in Montreal, Alaya Care. These guys have a platform for delivering home care globally, and they're dealing with a lot of those sort of data privacy challenges around healthcare. And so they've really built their application so it can literally run on any infrastructure, so on any cloud provider, on a private cloud, and I think that's another interesting one. In Canada, we had the Trudeau campaign, so our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, sort of had a very interesting rise from being in charge of the third party. And in Canada, we actually have sort of more than two parties, which is kind of an interesting system. And really to be able to run a campaign and bring all the resources to bear in that kind of context, where it's really a combination of private cloud, regional cloud services, and taking advantage of public cloud, to go and win something in a very short time frame was really an amazing experience.
And you're standing that up and then utilizing it and then bringing it back down.
Absolutely, and the needs are really not well predetermined. So as the campaign evolves, you've got to be able to go get resources within minutes of the demand being there, which is a really big challenge.
You're saying these campaigns are not predictable?
They're not very predictable. That's correct. What's predictable is that they'll be unpredictable, I think.
Got it.
So these are the kinds of customers we're working with, and really the unifying thread there is that they're all depending in some way on NetApp's software-defined storage, so we can bring the right amount of resources to the right problem at the right time and combine that with all of their existing data.
Yeah, awesome stories, really. You're touching a lot of different landscapes with us. All right, I think we ought to move into the let's help the audience phase a little bit here, right? A lot of your clients are wading into this hybrid cloud model with some degree of uncertainty, and it's a difficult journey, right? So you've seen a lot of clients go through this. Where do you see kind of early successes as they begin to engage, and then where can you advise them on the more difficult aspects of this journey?
Yeah, thanks. That's a hard problem, right? So the adoption. So, and what we've really seen is sort of getting there is the easy part. Getting to hybrid, a lot of folks have sort of gotten there sort of in a relatively unplanned fashion. Where we see the real challenges is around the hybrid cloud operations. How do you make all of these disparate systems actually work together effectively? And then making sure that the consumers of these systems, the end users, are actually really well served. And that end user experience aspect, combined with the operational challenges, are the two areas where customers have both struggled initially the most and then realized that they have to invest heavily in that area.
Well, that's helpful to know, because a lot of people are going to be embarking upon that journey if they haven't already started. You know, as more of your clients become what I'll call cloud capable, you know, and whatever that means, starting to get comfortable with this journey, what emerging technologies, in your opinion, show the most promise in helping them achieve their transformation goals?
Well, there's a lot of amazing technologies, obviously, popping up every day now. I referred to a few of them before, so the containerization and really the orchestration of these containers, and again, Kubernetes is something which seems to be taking the world by storm. Pretty much all the platform, sort of the PaaS tools are now based in one way or another on Kubernetes as an engine. And I think really the ability to have products like SolidFire that have APIs and QoS as a first-class citizen designed from the ground floor into the product, as opposed to most products which have that bolted on as an afterthought, which leads to a lot of operational problems, especially at scale, I think is a big deal.
Good. All right, appreciate it. Look, I can't let you get out of here. CEO of a cloud-enabling company, we've got to get your opinion. For everybody in the audience, what are the 3 top pieces of advice that you'd give to your audience about this journey before we close it out?
Well, I think the first would be not everything I think we've realized this, not everything belongs in the public cloud, and the future is really about getting the right balance of public, regional, and private cloud and making that all work together. And planning to adjust that balance over time. The second would be, I'd come back to the cloud operations excellence. Sort of as we move to a cloud operations model, it's really about sort of the, getting the minimum viable platform in place and then iterating and operating over time. And then finally, I would say, and this is the problem that I think brings it back to the theme of this conference, making sure you can get the right data to the right place at the right time is absolutely critical. There's a great, another great quote, Norton's Law, that all data trends over time to either deleted or public. And I think there was some news about that lately, if you've been paying attention. So we really feel that the way you own your destiny in the clouds starts with owning your data.
Some great lessons learned and great advice for the audience. Thanks for joining us today, Ian.
Thanks, Bill.
Appreciate it. Okay, now I'd like to welcome back to the stage our CEO, George Kurian.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you to Todd and Ian. I hope you learned some valuable lessons and insights from real practitioners and leaders in dealing with the important opportunities and challenges of changing the world with data. I want to spend a few minutes and just share with you a perspective on NetApp and our roadmap for this digital world. As we said, and as you heard many times this morning, the world's changing fundamentally and quickly due to a variety of broad economic and demographic reasons. And digital transformation tops the strategic agenda in most organizations. Digital transformation is the application of digital technology to radically improve the performance and the reach of enterprises. And today, when you speak to your business leaders, you will probably see digital transformation cloaked in one of these 3 business imperatives. There are 3 ways that companies are using technology to accomplish their business objectives. The first is to enable new customer touchpoints. These are examples of people using mobile phones, for example, or the internet to reach new customers in new ways. I mentioned the State Bank of India. I also have with us our Chief Marketing Officer, Gene English, who has transformed NetApp's own digital marketing capabilities to reach new customers in a very cost-effective, personalized manner. The second is to complement traditional physical businesses with data-centric digital businesses. There are several examples. HealthX is a perfect example of a data-centric digital business revolutionizing human welfare with medical care. And then finally, using technology to radically improve your business operations. This could be support, technical support. We've got examples of a variety of advancements that we at NetApp have made using artificial intelligence and machine learning combined with big data to dramatically improve your experience of working with us. In essence, a digital transformation journey moves an organization from a business process-centric world to a data-centric world. In a digital world, business process is essentially reduced to software and rules. And what's left of value is data. And data is the lifeblood of a digital organization. It is increasingly, as you heard from so many people this morning, distributed, diverse, and dynamic, rapidly changing in its form and scope. And putting all of those distributed data sources together to have value and impact business performance is a strain on siloed IT architectures. This is because most IT architectures that are being discussed with you today were designed for the business process-centric world, or even its predecessor, the system-centric world. And what you need in the future is not a siloed paradigm of data management, but a data fabric. You don't need data silos, you need a data fabric, just like the leader of Cloud Ops mentioned, to stitch together all of the places where you put your data into a seamless integrated whole. 3 years ago, we introduced the idea of the data fabric at Insight, building on a heritage of data management, leadership, and expertise. And today, we have augmented that vision dramatically, providing a full range of hybrid cloud data services that simplify the management of applications and data across all of the disparate clouds, both public and private, and all of the places where you put your data. Today, the data fabric connects hundreds of thousands of endpoints deployed in production environments at customers large and small. And we have well over 1,000 customers in production on hybrid cloud use cases of the data fabric, and growing very rapidly. This reason for our success is that the data fabric unleashes the full potential of data in your organization for business impact. It provides data visibility and insights, data access and control, and data protection and security, and helps you achieve your digital transformation objectives. Not only that, we have been, over the last few years, allowing you to embrace the data fabric as you embrace the IT imperatives that encompass your digital roadmap. You can start by deploying the data fabric to harness the power of the hybrid cloud. You can also deploy the data fabric to build a next-generation data center, combining the world's best converged and hyper-converged infrastructure solutions and radical new forms of object storage, combining serverless computing in the cloud with your data center. And you can embrace the data fabric as you modernize your traditional data center environments with the world's leading all-flash arrays and the world's best software-defined data management infrastructure. All of these solutions have been a part of NetApp's own transformation. We declared the transformation of NetApp 2 years ago, and it meant that we were going to fundamentally change and prioritize our investments in the portfolio of innovation that enables the digital transformation roadmaps of our customers. We also said that we would fundamentally change how we operate our business. And over the last 4 quarters, the momentum and the results of those transformation journeys have become increasingly apparent, not only to us, but also to you. We have, in 2016, seen accelerating momentum quarter after quarter after quarter. And I don't think there has ever been a CEO of NetApp who has been able to stand in front of a large group of customers and declare that we are the top 5 enterprise storage systems vendor, the fastest growing, the top 5 fastest growing all-flash array vendor, the top 5 fastest growing SAN vendor, and the leader, the fastest growing integrated infrastructure and certified reference architecture with FlexPod together with Cisco. All of our discipline and hard work and focus on your customer success is paying off. And I particularly want to thank you, our customers, for the trust and confidence that you put in us. But not only that, these are the broadest and deepest market share gains we've ever made in our 25-year history. How about that? And it is supported with clear, defensible innovation leadership in every category that matters. We are the leading storage operating system provider. We are the leading all-flash array storage operating system provider. And today, you will see NetApp announce leadership in every conceivable category in storage performance, scale, latency, cost, storage efficiency that matters. We have never had a time when we have owned virtually every world record that is available to own in storage. So thank you for that. I thank the engineering teams that have been involved in creating this leadership and continue to expand our leadership. And we're not done yet. This morning, you will see a press release that announces one of the most significant product innovations and partnerships that we have made in our 25-year history. It is a cornerstone of how we see the world of the next decade evolve, and will cement the leadership of 2 of the world's leading players, the leader in hyperscalers with the leader in enterprise together, building on the momentum of the relationship and partnership that we announced in June with Microsoft. We are announcing today the industry's first Azure Enterprise NFS service. Put simply, this is the world's best enterprise NFS technology integrated natively into Microsoft Azure and powered by NetApp. And what it allows you to do is to unleash the power of your data by transforming the way you manage it, not only in your data center, but across all of the locations where Azure will be offered over the next year. Together, we're delivering enterprise data services that are needed to truly extend workloads like databases, analytics, email, DevOps, and disaster recovery into the cloud. And it's NFS for everyone, the world's best NFS for everyone. NetApp and non-NetApp customers, new cloud buyers and traditional data center leaders, cloud architects, app developers, and data scientists. We're also announcing today deeper integrations with Microsoft Azure in cloud control for Office 365 and AltaVault solutions for Microsoft Azure. And tomorrow, at the keynote tomorrow morning, we're going to demo the Azure Enterprise NFS service right here on the main stage. You can find more information about our Enterprise NFS services through preview on netapp.com/Azure Preview. I'm so excited to tell you about this news. You will see over the course of the next few days that Insight has evolved. And we've evolved it to bring in more of customers, teaching customers, and more of the lessons of practitioners teaching practitioners. So take advantage of it. We talked about empowering you to change the world with data. Ken talked about using data to change the world at large. Our customers talked about using data to change their business. And today I want to tell you about using data to change the life of a family. About 5.5 years ago, a little boy who lived in San Francisco was diagnosed with a tumor behind his right eye, between the eye and his brain. It was such a rare instance of that condition that doctors in the western half of the United States were mystified to find it in such a little boy. It required those doctors to make sophisticated medical images and share those medical images with doctors in Canada and the United Kingdom on multiple conference calls to make sure that they understood the source of that condition. And those medical images were projected on life-sized television screens inside a surgical operating theater, where for 14.5 hours, this little boy was at the hands of a team of the world's best surgeons. And today, I get to go home and see the statement of changing the world with data come to life every evening in a healthy, happy, fully healed 13-year-old who loves me and who tells me that, "Dad, I'm so happy to see you come home." We all have the opportunity to change the world with data. I get to see it visibly every single day. So today, as you leave here, I'm going to ask you to think hard about how are you going to take this chance to make our world better by changing it with data. I want to challenge you to be your best self, particularly this week, to hold each other up and to be our best selves, because we have a chance to make this world truly better. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here at Insight. Thank you. Before you leave, I have just a few additional slides. I just want to share with you a couple of updates. Over 90% of the breakouts are taking place. All of the keynote speakers and all of the demos that we will have from the main stage are going to continue to take place as planned. And we have all of our special guest speakers as well in attendance. I want to just share a couple of things about the sessions that are being added to the schedule. Up here, you'll see the sessions that were added, and we have a few that were canceled. And all of this information that will be available to you in the mobile applications for Insight on your mobile phones. I also want to close by sharing a couple of perspectives on coming together. You know, I know that many of you have asked us about how we as a community can come together in light of the circumstances that we have here in Las Vegas. And on Wednesday night, we want to bring all of you, the extended NetApp community, together to appreciate you and to say thank you and to hold each other close and support you at the event mentioned here on this slide. We will have a special performance by Weezer as well to acknowledge the unique circumstances that we find ourselves in and to appreciate each other. So I welcome you to come to that. I also want to tell you that we have been asked repeatedly over the last few days about making contributions and donations back to the community at large. I can tell you that having spoken to the facilities as well as the local authorities, the Red Cross is oversubscribed for taking blood donations, and they cannot keep up with the number of people showing up at the locations they've already got in place. And so we continue to look into this. But today I want to ask that we have got an event for called Rise Against Hunger. You will see signs. It's as an organization that we at NetApp have been supporting through the course of this past year to make a visible contribution to ending hunger in American cities. So I'd ask for your support and help with that. With that, it concludes this morning's session. May you go strongly into this week, and may you support each other, and let's be great together. Thank you. God bless you. Welcome to Insight.